Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to a Tuesday episode of After Hours with me, Jamie, and Craig. A little bit delayed this week. Normally we do this show on Sunday, but we've had some family obligations get in the way. Garrett's on vacation. We've had kid stuff going on. So I know you guys have been looking for more content, and we will be ramping that back up here this week moving forward. But sometimes, unfortunately, life gets in the way. Craig, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. I think the folks out there that understand that are married with families, especially with multiple young kids, get where we're coming from. You have the best of intentions, but life is gonna life.
Yeah, it just happens. We're all getting pulled in different directions. So we appreciate the understanding and we appreciate the support. Hopefully, everybody enjoys this show and we'll be cranking out the content just like usual moving forward. So, with that in mind, we have some content to crank out right now. We have a big 10-point Chargers win over the Tennessee Titans from Sunday to talk about. So, Craig, why don't you start? Why don't you start with a couple of things that you noticed that kind of stood out to you and that, kind of talk about maybe some big takeaways of how things are starting to take shape for the team.
Well, let's just kick it off with the offensive side of the ball because I know that's what a lot of people are excited about based on what they saw Sunday. So we can just talk about the run game first and foremost. I want to start with the prime example. So that 95-yard drive in the fourth quarter that basically stomped the Titans out, where they basically ran a pill like on 10 of 11 plays. Well, like there was one that didn't count because there was a pass interference on, you guessed it, Kenneth Murray, our old friend. So Herbert also had a couple of runs on that drive as well. They chewed up like over 7 minutes of clock. And nobody loved that more than those barbarians, Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. They salivate for drives like that. Tennessee was the number one defense in the league in yards allowed, and they were giving up just over a smidge, like I think 273 or so yards per game. And the Chargers ended the day with 309 yards. And I mean, what else can you say about Justin Herbert other than he's the tide that lifts all boats? You saw him using his legs for like the first time in a while consistently. But again, you probably have to think that's associated with him feeling better due to that high ankle sprain that he was battling through. But the dude looked like Oregon Justin Herbert all over again. It's like the Rose Bowl. He's just, I think people didn't know that he had the type of agility that he has also. He can gallop. The dude can definitely move, but he showed some wiggle and he caught some people off guard, specifically, again, Kenneth Murray. There's a reoccurring theme here. But again, look at what he's doing with like his band of skill position misfits. You got QJ, who continues to grow. Ladd is as good as advertised. Josh Palmer's basically Mr. Big Plays only. And then you sprinkle in like the run blocking tight end too, who's also the leader in targets. Again, yuck, that's disgusting, but is what it is. He's making it work though. And he's also being deadly efficient in the process. What's wilder is that DJ Chark barely even sniffed the field because Harbaugh didn't want to screw with the synergy. So I look at it this way. It's basically like if your roux is good, then you don't have to add any filet to your gumbo. I don't expect anyone to know what the hell I just said, but if you know, you know.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing and kind of the word of the day for Sunday was complimentary because they're getting plays out of every phase of the game right now. It's not just the kicking game and Cameron Dicker, kicking field goals. Now we've had 2 games in a row with big returns from Darius Davis to set up timely scores. You've got the offense starting to run the ball better. The interior offensive line looked much better for long stretches of that game. You're starting to see they're putting Herbert in a position where he doesn't have to make 25 plays a game. Now he needs to make maybe 4 or 5 plays a game, maybe a couple with his legs, a couple with his arm, and it's enough to win. They don't need to have him be Superman to win games, which is exactly what we've been talking about and begging for the last 5 years. So it's the plan is working, right? You're seeing all 3 phases contributing. They're not killing themselves with stupid penalties. They're protecting the football. They can put points on the board when they need to. They can run the ball when they need to. They're getting to the quarterback now, which they weren't doing early in the season. So now they're affecting the quarterback pretty much all game long for 3 straight games. it's really a complete win. And I know it was only a 10-point win, but it really felt like it was more like a 25-point win. That game was even at 13-10. Once they got past that non-fumble at the end of the half, that game really never felt like it was in doubt.
No, for sure. And here's another stat of the day. They didn't allow a sack, which completely threw me off because we were talking about a defense that boasted Jeffrey Simmons and Tavadre Sweat on the interior against a Chargers interior offensive line that you probably would have been tempted to bet the house on being completely overmatched. But that really wasn't the case. Just to kind of name a couple players here to give some props to. Jamari Sawyer fared decently in place of Trey Pipkins. It wasn't fantastic, but it was okay. Bradley Bozeman, okay. Bradley does a good job at snapping the ball and being Kevin Costner to Herbert's Whitney Houston. Gen Zers, The Bodyguard. It's a movie. Trust me, Google it in case you don't have no idea what I'm talking about. But moving on to Zion. Zion was kind of all right. I think it had something to do with the Chargers having double the rushing attempts compared to passing. So it may just be possible that the dude was born in the wrong era. If this was like the mid 70s, he might be the man.
Yeah, I actually think you might be selling Salyer a little bit short. I thought Salyer played a really good game, particularly in the run game. He was helping out Bozeman a lot of combo blocks and double team blocks up front, opening up holes in the middle of that line. The Chargers' first possession, they had a couple big runs, I think both by Gus, that gashed the Tennessee defense right up the middle off of, I believe it was right inside of right guard. And Salyer and Bozeman just took Sweat and moved him off the ball and opened up a big hole. You could see Zion starting to play a little bit better. It seemed like the communication on the interior of the offensive line was better for the most part. They still had some leaks, but they were able to overcome those. They weren't backbreaking leaks like they've been in the past. And you even see Zion start to get out into space. They pulled him a little bit more, pulling him off to the right side and getting him out in space and allowing him to make blocks in the running game. He was matched up one-on-one with Zion quite a bit with Jeffrey Simmons. And outside of that one play before the half where it was a fumble and they ruled it not a fumble by Herbert, he actually held up extremely well, I thought, both in the run game and in pass protection.
So again, it lends more to my point that they ran the ball a ton more than passing. So it was almost less opportunities for them kind of screw the pooch. When we see them exposed, it's when Herbert's dropping back 20 to 25 times a game, which really and truly I'm fine with. It's just when you're talking about like the 25 to 30 plus snaps, they shouldn't find themselves in situations where that has to happen if the running game is actually working to the effect that it was just this past Sunday. But in the running game, collectively, those dudes can move, specifically Zion. He's an athlete. That's never been in question. It's really just the pass protection and picking up stunts, things of that nature, and it's just the inconsistency of it. But on Sunday, with fewer reps having to move backwards, and get into pass sets, I think it lent really well for them. And offensive line, we know they like going forward more so than they like going backwards. So I think that they definitely did a really good job in the running game. I mean, the proof was in the pudding. But as far as the passing goes, I feel like we'll find out more about them collectively. And I don't know how long Pipkins is going to be out, but if you're going to ask Jamari Sawyer to drop back in pass protection, 20 plus times a game, he's going to get in his pass sets that often. I'm not sure how well he'll fare on the interior, but for what they did on Sunday, it was a tremendous job all the way around. But the game plan played into what outside of the strength of the Titans, because they have one of the best passing defenses in the league. So the Chargers had a game plan to attack them with the run, and Gus looks rejuvenated. I've not seen this Gus Edwards since Baltimore. So all the way around offensively, I think they did a fantastic job for the game plan that they doled out for the Titans. Now, if you have to get into a bit of a shootout, potentially, we'll see how the offensive line holds up then.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at that Titans defense and the way they stop the run, and they have some pretty good interior offensive linemen, they were able to keep Gus moving downhill without having to stop his feet, and he was able to burst through the hole, one cut and go. Didn't have to dance, didn't have to stop his feet, and he got a full head of steam going several times. So they did a good job there, and then with JK, it seemed like they figured out a way to get him out on the edges of the defense a little bit more and get some plays, particularly off the left side. They get Fisk and Matlock on the left side and just get those two plus Slater leading the way and get some big gains there. So encouraging to see the running game kind of take shape with Gus back. We'll see how things move forward, but it seemed like they found something with Salyer at right guard. To me, the interior of the offensive line looked better than it has all year. And I hear what you're saying about, they only threw the ball 18 times or only dropped back 18 times, but they only allowed 3 quarterback hits. And Herbert was doing a really good job of getting the ball out and running when he needed to. So hopefully they find something with that interior offensive line and they're able to keep Salyer out there. I've never been a Pipkins fan. I don't think he's very good. I don't think he's been particularly good this year. It just seems like Salyer gives them some girth and some muscle inside, and maybe that's what they need right now.
Yeah, he definitely has the body type to play on the interior. Pipkins is built more like a tackle, and he has more of the athleticism to play out on the edge. But Salyer just is a large, wide mass. He takes up a lot of space, and he is like that really squatty build and the ability to move people off of the ball and create surge. I think, and you mentioned this, there's something to JK's biggest runs. They almost seemingly come on the left side of the line. When he busts those really big ones, the ones that he gets to the outside, whether they run like outside zone, those toss plays, they almost always seem to come to the left side. But on Sunday, as far as eating between the tackles, that was all Gus. And he was getting, like you mentioned, because that's the type of back he is, he has to build up a head of steam to be really effective. If there's any penetration into the backfield before he gets to that second and third step, you can pretty much stop his progress. But none of that was happening. He was creating, like at the point of contact, guys were moving backwards. You could see his legs churning. And that's going to pay dividends the later they go into the season. Teams are going to have a really hard time dealing with that combination of backs. And it's JK. I wouldn't necessarily call JK a true slasher. He has some power to his game, but he's way more of a slasher than Gus is. Definitely more agile. But that's going to be a difficult backfield to contend with, especially if you're talking about inclement weather. If they make a run into the playoffs after you've been beat up all season long, the last thing you're going to want to see is a 6'2", 240-pound back coming downhill.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned Herbert a little bit earlier. I think it's worth mentioning just how good he's been over the last few weeks. I think he's on like a really solid 3 or 4 week run at this point. Obviously, that's coinciding with him getting healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
His base is healthy, and you can see that in the pocket with the way he's starting to elude pressure, climb the pocket. Now he's starting to get out of the pocket and create with his legs. You're starting to see a little bit more of them moving the pocket. We saw it 2 or 3 times. They did it early in the game, moved the pocket, got a quick pass to help build some rhythm with QJ on the first drive, kind of fueled that initial field goal drive. But Herbert to me looks like a totally different player, and he looks like that kind of, I hate using the word generational because everybody uses it, but that kind of transcendent talent of like, he just looks like he's comfortable in his own skin and he knows what he needs to do. He's not second guessing anything. He's not mistrusting what he's seeing. He's just playing. And it seems like he really had that coached out of him the last 4 or 5 years, and maybe even to a certain extent in college. He's had so many offensive coordinator changes, so many head coach changes in his career over the last 8 or 9 years, that getting kind of a stabilizing force like Harbaugh, who played the position at a high level, and an experienced OC. As much as we may not love Roman, I think he's been getting better and getting more creative. But it just seems like Herbert is figuring out who he is on the field and making those plays, and he's making it look easy, and it looks like he's having fun for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, and there's something to say about him not feeling limited physically. I do believe that the plan was probably to have him get maybe 2 to 3 design runs this entire time. But again, if he couldn't move because of that bad ankle, then he was forced to kind of sit in the pocket, like almost like a sitting duck, no pun intended, with that interior offensive line playing the way that it had to this point. But again, now him being more mobile allows him to elude some of that pressure that's in his face. He can get to the perimeter because he's athletic enough to do it, and he gives his receivers an opportunity to create maybe some extended plays, because they don't always create separation just in the routine of their routes. Sometimes plays have to be extended to allow guys to gain some separation, maybe on sort of those schoolyard type plays. But him getting on the outside into the perimeter as a runner, it's freaky because you've seen it like just a couple of games ago. I think it might have been against the Saints. I believe he split two defenders and they're almost shocked by how athletic and how fast he is. It gives defenses another thing to have to think about, and this is where Greg Roman's offense shines. Historically is how it's worked. Is he going to be Colin Kaepernick? No, he doesn't have to be. He's not going to have to be Lamar Jackson. But if he has the threat of being a runner, defenses are going to have to respect it, but they're still not anticipating it. So you're probably going to see him breaking off more runs, similarly to what you saw last week, more often than not, because defenses just expect them to beat them with his arm.
Yeah, we talked about this last year when they hired Kellen Moore, and I really thought it'd be part of the offense, but it wasn't. I think there's an opportunity to script maybe 5 or 6 designed running plays for him in key situations that just it adds a different wrinkle to the offense, and it just makes them that much more dangerous. Where if you can run some of that zone read, I love the QB power, the sweep they ran with him in the end zone. Love that play. Been looking for that forever. But if you're in 3rd and 3 or less, or you're in the red zone, and you can run that power sweep with the quarterback, that's a huge weapon. And then you start, faking handoffs and rolling them out in different directions. There are opportunities to build double moves off of short patterns with some of those running plays built in. It just opens up the offense. And he doesn't have to run the ball 10 or 15 times, but if you call 5 or 6 in the right situations, and then you get him scrambling 3 or 4 times a game, it's just a different offense.
It forces defenses to have to account for it, especially if you can create space, say like and create those one-on-one scenarios. If you catch a defense in man and you can spread them out, then you have a numbers advantage because there's no one to account for the quarterback. If you get those receivers running downfield, linebackers chasing guys in the slot, safeties, cornerbacks, pretty much everyone at the 2nd and 3rd level, he just has to outrun defensive linemen and defensive ends. And I know in the NFL, those dudes are fast, but Herbert is athlete enough to do it. He can make guys miss, and that creates other opportunities because defenses will be less confident to play man-to-man in fear of him beating them with his legs. So then they'll go into zones, and he can carve those up. So it's just more of an advantage to the offense. It creates more options. It stresses the defense that much more. And now you kind of have an understanding as to why you may not necessarily need, let's say, a number 1 wide receiver. I still believe they need a primary tight end. I think they need a number 1 pass catching tight end. They'll figure that out in the future. But when you have a quarterback who can move that way, it creates that additional player that defenses can't necessarily account for on every single snap for all of the things he can do. So defensive coordinators have a long night ahead of them or week ahead of them when they're prepping for the Chargers, because this is the Justin Herbert that makes this offense run optimally. And I think it's only going to grow from here. As long as he can stay healthy, I think defenses are going to struggle week in and week out. The numbers are going to be great. You may not love or see a ton of 250 plus passing yards, but it won't always be necessary because he'll make up for what he's not doing with his arm, with his legs, and everybody will eat in the passing game as well. So it all comes together.
It's like I said earlier, right? He doesn't have to make a play 40 times a game for them to win. Now if he can make 4 or 5 plays, maybe 2 of them on the ground, 3 of them in the red zone or on 3rd down to extend drives, that's going to be enough to win games because of how good the defense is, and because of how good the special teams is becoming, and because of how good the running game is. He doesn't have to throw for 250, 350 yards. He doesn't have to throw for 4 touchdowns. I think he'll still have some of those games. There will be times where he needs them or where it's just flowing and it happens. But he doesn't need to have those games for them to win. And like I said, that's what we've been really clamoring for since he came in the league is let's make things a little bit easier for this guy so he doesn't have to be Superman. And we're finally seeing it. We have a coach who knows what he's doing. They're putting in systems that work. The players all understand what their roles are. They're all playing exceptionally well, and they're playing as a team. Nobody's out there trying to do more than what they're capable of or more than what they're supposed to do. And it's all coming together.
It just feels good to know that week in and week out, you don't have to look at it as if we go into like these weeks where we try to get a gauge on how the game might go and what the game plan might be. You don't have to basically bank that every week if Justin Herbert doesn't throw for 250 plus and 2 or 3 touchdowns, the Chargers are going to lose, because every week they can design whatever works against that particular defense from an offensive standpoint, and they can stick to that. And if they need to adapt in game and make adjustments, then they can do it. But he's not the end all be all. I mean, granted, it starts and ends with him, but it doesn't mean that he has to be everything at all times. Guys can contribute, and he's helping teams get better. Helping other players get better. You see guys raising their level of play. I mentioned Quentin Johnston. Again, Will Dissly being one of your leading targets tells you everything you need to know about the type of player that Herbert is to this offense. And even though Dissly's play isn't perfect, he's being asked to do something that he's not great at. He's still a contributor in a way that nobody really saw coming. So again, Herbert's the guy that makes it all go. He just doesn't have to do everything all the time. He's still a part of everything, but he's not the guy that has to make the play, or else, the Chargers are sunk. So it's just nice to be able to see that every week. You get a little variety.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think this defense deserves a lot of credit too, and particularly the pass rush. We were really critical of the pass rush the last few weeks. Well, not the last few weeks, but the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, we were pretty critical of them. They were not winning a lot of one-on-one matchups. The blitz wasn't getting home consistently. They really were not affecting the quarterback or getting to the quarterback very much. But now I think, if I have the number correct, I think they have 19 sacks in the last 3 weeks. It's something along those lines. I think they had 7 2 weeks ago, 6 last week, and 7 this week, if I'm not mistaken. So, and that is a lot of guys. Obviously, the secondary is holding up, but that is a lot of guys winning one-on-one matchups, getting to the quarterback. And man, Thule deserves a lot of credit because he had a huge game on Sunday. Kind of led the way for the pass rushers, was phenomenal against the run, got home several times against the quarterback, and that seemed to give the defense energy, and it seemed to fuel the pass rush. It was like they were competing against each other to get to the quarterback. Are you still there? I think we might have lost Craig for a second. So, Craig, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry.
Okay.
Cut off for a second. I'm here.
All right.
What was the last thing you said? Sorry.
I was just saying it seemed like Thule fueled the pass rush in a lot of ways, and it seemed like he gave the defense energy, and it seemed like those guys were competing against each other to get to the quarterback in the second half in particular.
Oh yeah, for sure. When the game started off, I was a little concerned because it felt like Khalil Mack's absence really affected the defense overall. I mean, they were giving up some runs that I don't feel like they would on the perimeter a little bit. And you can see the Titans, I mean, they have a good running game, getting downhill in between the tackles as well. But they really went in at halftime and made some adjustments, and defense tightened up. And then after that, everybody had a piece. We're talking about whether it was in the run or the passing game. But Thule, I feel like, is starting to become one of those guys that, not necessarily a leader in the way that you would look at a guy like Khalil Mack, but he's starting to feel like one of those glue guys on the defense that the team actually builds off of. They feed off of his energy, kind of like you mentioned. And you see him improving. He's always going to win with effort. The technique is coming along, but what you're seeing here is that guys are eating, or he's eating, as far as a pass rusher is concerned, because of the work that he puts in as an edge setter. All of that plays off of one off of the other. So if you're good as a run or edge setter, like he is, he's a natural at that. That effort translates into decent pass rush as well, because you're wearing on those guys that are blocking you on the edges, whether it's tackles or whether it's tight ends. You're making them have to work to keep you off of running backs, and then you can switch up your technique and your moves to get after the quarterback. So he's making guys work hard down after down after down. So it's paying off for him. Being a solid edge setter is just basically lending to his efforts as a pass rusher, and the team definitely feeds off of that type of energy. Even Bud Dupree, you saw him getting home a couple times as well. Poona Ford had a sack on the interior. It just felt like everyone. It's like, Jim Harbaugh's thing about the olives, and you turn the bottle upside down and nothing comes out, and then you pull out one and then the others start to come out. It was an avalanche in that way. So the team definitely feeds off of each other's energy, each individual player. But Thule feels like, again, one of those glue guys that the defense kind of absorbs that energy, and you can see it translate on the field to the rest of the guys. So I really love Thule and the growth that he's showing. And again, you got Joey Bosa who got involved as well. He's definitely not 100%, but what he got, what was that, his 70th sack? So he's now
I
what,
think so.
second
Yeah.
all time in Chargers history as far as pass rushes are concerned with sacks. So bravo to him. He's definitely not all the way there, but he's still fighting. And he's a guy that's been dealing with injuries. We know the story about him, but he's out there giving it his full effort. Where we might have been critical of him in the past for being injured and just not being available, he's pushing through because he sees what this team is doing and he wants to be a part of it. So again, bravo to everyone on the front. And again, it's all about Jim Harbaugh, and the type of attitude that he's brought to this team is starting to permeate throughout.
Yeah, I mentioned complimentary earlier in the game. I think the other word that really signifies or that represents this team is together. They're playing together. They are playing together on offense, on defense, on special teams. It seems like they're all really buying into what Harbaugh is selling and what Minter and Roman are selling, and they're executing at a higher level than we've seen in a long time. And I think Daniel Popper said this in an article today. And I'm going to go ahead. I'll credit him, but I'll go ahead and steal it. They are Jim Harbaugh raised the floor of this team. Now we no longer have to worry about them, pissing down their own legs, so to speak, when the game gets tough. Now they're making the other team piss down their legs. So that he's
Yeah.
raised the floor of the team, and now we have to see where the ceiling goes from here. But this team, to me, they're going to compete. They're going to fight. They're going to play together as a unit, and they're going to do their jobs. And those are things that we have not been able to say about this team for a long time. And that is why you hire Jim Harbaugh, because of the culture and the competition that he brings with him. And guys, it just seems like it's infectious. Guys just buy in and they believe and they want to go fight for him in a way that I'm not sure they've wanted to fight for previous coaches.
Yeah, and people can say what they want about Jim Harbaugh, him being quirky and all that, but he sets a standard and guys follow. They have this way. I mentioned this before. It feels like players don't want to let him down. He almost has like that dad thing to him where you want to make him proud. So you go out there and give your best effort. And you don't want to have him catch you slipping at all. You don't want to have him see you not giving your best effort. You want to go out there to be able to have him say, when you walk in the locker room, you can get those imaginary game balls, whatever. You just want him to be proud of you overall. But while we're talking about the defense, and Jim Harbaugh deserves all the credit overall for the entirety of the team. As far as other coaches are concerned, big shout out specifically to the second level and the secondary. So Navarro Bowman for the job that he's doing with the linebackers, Steve Klingscale for the work that he's doing with the secondary. I mean, when you consider when we went into the season, what we thought the weaknesses of this defense would be, we probably looked primarily at the second level and the linebackers, not knowing what to expect. I mean, we had an idea about the secondary because Durham was there. Alohi Gilman had a good season last year, so you felt okay about the safeties. The depth behind it, you weren't certain about, but the corners were big question marks. Now you've got 2 fifth-round rookies out there that are doing it week in and week out on the big stage, and the moment's not too big for them. Deion Henley looks like, right now, Deion Henley, the Pro Bowl is a popularity contest. To me, Deion Henley looks almost like an all-pro linebacker because he's doing it in both the passing and the running game, but he's going under the radar. The consistency that he's showing every week and the improvement that you see, even in his, for instance, in coverage, he's getting amazing depth in his zone. So you're not seeing a lot of those passes that were happening earlier in the season at the second level get above the linebackers in those gaps right there when we're talking like cover 2 or whenever he's doing his drops in 3. He's just becoming a really good all-around player. He got his first sack on Sunday, and then you're seeing him making tackles for loss. He's affecting the game in the backfield and at the second level. So coaching, bravo to that, because I don't think any of us saw the level of play specifically at those spots that we're getting to this point.
I mean, you know me, I like to be right, and I like to toot my own horn when I'm right. But I will gladly admit that I was wrong, because when we previewed this team and specifically the defense backer group in the league, and this is the best defense in the league, primarily because of the work the second and third levels are doing, and they're doing it really without like anybody standing out. They're all just blending in and doing their jobs. No one's popping off the screen on a week-to-week basis. No one's coming like that. They have guys making plays. Molden's coming up with interceptions. Henley's making tackles and making plays. Perriman's flashed. Hart's played well, but they don't really have anybody on the defense that's standing out to the point of people are like, that dude's an all-pro. That guy's a defensive player of the year candidate. That guy's the guy that's the guy that the straw that stirs the drink. They don't have anybody like that right now. Everybody's blending in, doing their job, kind of keeping their head down and just pushing forward and plugging along, and they have the best defense in the league because of it. So I think that's just a huge testament to what Jesse Minter's doing, to what Bowman's doing, to what the secondary coaches are doing. They are all doing a phenomenal job, and the players are all buying in and just doing their jobs. You're not having those bonehead penalties or the blown assignments that we saw with Staley. There's no confusion. There's no miscommunication. Everybody's where they're supposed to be on pretty much every play, except for Jaseo Taylor against Calvin Ridley last week, which, by the way, can we not see him outside anymore? Can Fulton or Zont or somebody please come back so Taylor doesn't have to be playing outside anymore?
Okay, so about that play, the split was tight. Taylor was aligned in the slot, I'm pretty sure. The problem is that they set a fantastic matchup just by alignment and formation. So the fact that they got Ridley to play so close to the tight end in that tight split put him in or Jasir in no man's land, because look, I'm sorry, on that first touchdown in the first quarter, it was a fantastic route by Ridley. He stemmed it outside, gained leverage on Taylor, and left him on his break. So yeah, but we never need to see that ever again. We know who Jasir Taylor is. He's just, he's played some good games, but when you up that competition to that level and you have that type of wide receiver, you never want to see Jasir on that guy. But again, overall, the defense, like you mentioned, they're playing team defense. There are no me guys on this team. And as much as I love the way Daiyan Henley's playing, and I think the only thing that's missing from his game is creating the turnovers to this point, but everything else to me is almost at all pro level. So I think he's teetering along that line. But yeah, I think this is the best type of defense to have. If you have one of those superstar guys, one or two of them, great. But you don't want them to have to carry a team. Anybody can be the star on any given week on this defense. And I don't think anyone cares, just as long as they get the job done.
Yeah, you just don't have anybody trying to go that extra mile, taking themselves out of position, trying to do too much. You just haven't had any of that, really.
Mm-mm.
It's been it's what you'd expect from a Harbaugh team, right? They're disciplined and they're playing team football. And like I said, that's why you bring a Harbaugh in, to get that buy-in and to get the discipline and the team football and the complementary football.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's the perfect blend of offense, defense, and again, the special teams is even doing their thing. It's great to have Darius Davis making his impact known here in the last couple of weeks, putting the offense in position to have shorter fields so they don't have to work as hard, earlier in the year. I don't know if he was hurt then, but you saw him making some questionable decisions on returns, and it was costing the team field position. And then there were instances where they were just having to start these long, arduous drives from inside the 10-yard line. It's all complementing. Every phase of the game is playing off of each other. And this is when you want to start to hit your stride. As you get towards the back end of the season, you're having some of those more difficult contests that are coming up. And the team is, you see them growing every week. And as we get towards the end of the season, I think I said it a few weeks ago, I thought this would be a second half team. And so they're starting to show it, but we'll see come this Sunday if they can keep the momentum going and just see where they go from there. But I have faith in number one, Jim Harbaugh, and he's doing everything that we believed he would.
By the way, we mentioned Calvin Ridley. When did he become Tyreek Hill? With the way Jonathan Vilma was talking about him, did you hear
Didn't
that?
He said he's one of the fastest, or did he say the fastest? Yeah. No, Phil, too many hits to the head. Linebacker's a rough position to play.
And he was talking about him like he's unstoppable, like he's on his way to 200 catches or something. I don't know what game he was watching, but anyway, just something that stood out to me in the commentary. All right, so we've talked about a lot of the good, pretty much all of the good stuff. We praised the coaches, we praised the offense, we praised the defense, the special teams. So let's talk a little bit about two or three things, if anything stood out to you that that maybe are concerns that you'd like to see them improve on, or that kind of give you pause moving down the stretch?
Okay, so I think this stands out to everyone. We've all noticed it. When you start playing some of the stiffer competition where you're probably going to have to put up a few more points and you can't expect this defense to hold them down to just 20 or under, you can't miss on those gotta have it plays. That Will Disley drop in the end
That was
zone.
that was Hurst, not Disley.
No. The touchdown pass. Like, no, you're talking about when there were two passes. Disley dropped one and Hurst dropped one. The one that Hurst dropped, no one was around him. Disley dropped one in the end zone. I forget who was defending him, but I think it may have been a corner or safety. Don't remember. But Disley definitely dropped a pass in the end zone that would have been a touchdown for any average tight end in the NFL. But the point is that you can't have plays like that fall by the wayside, especially against stiffer competition. So I don't think that there's a solve to that unless you just don't put those players in that position. Hayden Hurst, I really don't know what to say at this point. He's not really contributing whatsoever in the passing game, and that was supposed to be his primary objective. It's one of the reasons why they signed him. I know that they think he's a decent blocker. That's all well and good, but first and foremost, he needs to be able to catch the ball. He's not shown himself to be able to be a difference maker in that way. Don't know what's going on with Stone Smart. Apparently, they just don't believe in him for some reason. I don't know. Don't get it. But I think that my question is going to be moving forward against teams that you may have to score a little bit more against. How will you be able to scheme up plays for guys who can make those plays consistently? And you got Ladd, you got QJ, who's definitely coming along, but the tight end position really, really scares me in the passing game because I don't think that you have any viable options. Disley does more than what we expect, but he's not a go-to guy, but he still often leads the team in targets. So that's the thing that stands out to me the most right now, specifically on the offensive side of the ball.
So I'll kind of simplify what you just said because it was a point that I wanted to make, and it's they have to be more efficient in the red zone in general. And that's something that was a big problem for them early in the season. The last 2 weeks, I believe, check my numbers on this chat, but I'm almost positive they're 6 out of 8 scoring touchdowns in the red zone the last 2 weeks. So that number is picking up, and that needs to continue to pick up because they were like 40%, something like that, in the red zone early in the year. And now as Herbert's getting healthy, now you're seeing QJ come back healthy. Gus is healthy. I think that's going to start to shift more in their favor, particularly in the second half of games as they start to wear on people with the running game. I think some of that stuff will take care of itself. But you have to be efficient in the red zone. That's something they've not been consistent at this year. The other thing too is they have not been very consistent on third down. Actually, well, they've been consistent. They've just been consistently bad.
Consistently inconsistent.
Yeah, I think they're somewhere in the 40-45% range converting third downs, maybe even worse than that. The last couple of weeks, they've been right around 40%. They have to get better at that so they can extend drives. They don't necessarily need to put up points on every drive. Obviously, it's the NFL. That's not going to happen. But they do need to be able to convert on third downs to keep the clock moving because this is a team that's built to control the clock. And even though they've been winning, they have not been really controlling the clock. I think last week, Cleveland had the ball for 10 minutes more than they did. This week, it was almost a 50-50 split, even though they had 27 points. So those are small details on the offensive side of the ball that I think need to be kind of tightened up. And I think they're headed in that direction on some of those points, but the third downs have to be, I think, much sharper.
Yeah, and it's also a team that needs to, or they thrive when they play ahead of the sticks. Although for the last few weeks, I will give Greg Roman credit for on those second and long situations, not necessarily just being super conservative and testing defenses down the field. It's paid dividends quite a few times, but you don't want to live and die with that. So right now, until the offense, well, as it continues to rev up and they kind of find their groove in the passing game, you just have to be efficient. And like you mentioned on third down, on Sunday, they were 4 of 10 again. So hovering around 40% just these last few weeks. You have to be better there. Herbert's just been playing efficient football in general, but when you look at those third down conversions, again, I'm thinking of all of this when you're talking about the better teams in the league. You have to be
Mhm.
better in these phases of the game. It's great to get it off against the Titans and the Browns and the Saints, but just those were warm ups. Now you're getting to the big boys, and you have to tighten this stuff up, or else this is where like the margins get really, really thin, and you can lose games by very, very little, and it will come down to just a few plays. So conversions, specifically on third down, getting into the red zone and coming away with sixes over threes more often than you have is going to be what does it and pushes you over the top.
Definitely. And I think while the defense has been fantastic, they've been really good on third down. I want to see that pass rush continue against better teams because they are kind of picking on some bad teams the last few weeks. So you want to see that continue against better competition. And the big thing for me is we've seen teams starting to have success running the ball, specifically to the edges the last few weeks. That was a big problem for them this week. The Titans ran the ball. They have a good running game. We'll give them credit for that. But I did not expect the Titans to be able to run the ball for 5 or 6 yards a clip the way it seemed like they were doing for most of the game on Sunday.
Yeah, it's scary to see, and then you take into consideration that you got right now. We don't know what Khalil Mack's status is overall. No, he's definitely hampered by I think it was a groin situation he had coming out of last week's game, which limited him to what like maybe a handful of snaps this week. And then Joey Bosa, we know what's going on with that. So right now, the only consistent edge setter you really have is Thule. And while he's very good at it, I'm still a young guy who's growing into the role, and it will wear on him. Teams just targeting you down after down after down in the run game. So yeah, they've got to figure that out. Unfortunately, the attrition really affects things there. But having guys on the outside on the perimeter, specifically your cornerbacks who aren't afraid to come down and get their nose dirty will help. But when teams run like those outside zones and they're targeting your edges and running behind those tight ends and tackle tandems, it can get really ugly in a hurry. And I mentioned that too. I noticed it as well. Just the running game doesn't seem as buttoned up as it was earlier in the season. And I'm curious to see how they perform against some more of these bigger backs. Like you got Derrick Henry coming to town in a couple weeks, and you got to shore that up, or else you're going to find yourself in a situation where teams can play the type of ball that you want to play. And then you're going to get into one of those knockdown, drag out fights that go all the way into the fourth quarter, and it's anybody's game. And as exciting as that is to watch as a fan, is also quite nerve wracking. So hopefully,
just a little stressful.
Yeah. So hopefully they pull it together. The last thing I want to see is this defense start to fall apart as the year goes on. So again, hopefully guys just start to get healthy and they round into form and they pick up where they started earlier in the year. But the competition is going to be stiffer. So if they don't play as well as they had earlier in the season, you just have to consider who they were playing and take that into account.
Yeah, Marcus in the chat made a good point. It's something we've talked about in the Discord, but I don't know that we've made the point here on the show. We praise the players, we praise the coaches. I think the guy who built the roster deserves a lot of credit too. We got to give Joe Ortiz a ton of credit. The scouting department in particular has done a great job. The mileage that they're getting out of mid to late round picks, which we've been saying for a decade now, is really at the end of the day, that's how championship rosters are built, right? You're building them with getting value out of those mid to late round picks, and the mileage they're getting out of guys like Still, like Hart, and some of these other guys is just huge. So they deserve a ton of credit for that. Cortez, the guys that he found on 1 and 2 year deals. I mean, we mentioned Ford. He's playing ridiculously well. Fulton was playing lights out before he got hurt. JK's having a great year now. Now Gus is back, and he looks like he's going to add to the offense in the second half. They found so many bargains in the draft and in free agency. You got to give them credit. It kind of makes you excited for what to look forward to in the coming years, because these next 2 or 3 years could be really fun.
Well, you guys are preaching to the choir, because Joe Ortiz was my number 1 selection for GM this offseason. So he's just, you talking about patting yourself on the back. Go ahead and give myself one, because I think he's just following suit with everything I thought he would do. Now, to the level that he's doing it so soon speaks volumes, because you have to really understand players to be able to get them to fit in the schemes this way that, either haven't played in these type of schemes before or are dealing with, poor play, but you can see that they might fit in your scheme better than where they were. Joe Ortiz clearly has an eye for those types of players. Jim Harbaugh tells him what he needs. He goes out and finds it. But what's even more encouraging is that they're doing this without super high level players at all of the most important positions. So it means that they can get guys to up their level of play, which speaks to coaching and understanding the type of player and how they fit. So yeah, I'm excited because they're going to get blue chip guys, but even if they don't get the best of the best, they're still probably going to get guys that are going to perform really well just because they understand the players.
They're doing a good job of finding guys who fit what they want, which is not something we've been able to say in the past.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're just about ready to wrap up. So why don't we take a few minutes? The chat can go ahead and send some questions in, and we'll throw some questions up, and then we'll get out of here. Do we have any questions from the chat?
While we're waiting on questions, I will bring this up. So you heard the statement about Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh today, right? He was on the Pat McAfee show, and he made mention of Minter definitely being a head coach in the NFL next year. So I'm going to get your opinion. Do you think this is one of those he's talking his guy up to maybe just put him out there? Because I'm sure he's on the radar around the league. It's no secret, the job he's done to this point. But do you feel like Minter could possibly be a one and done?
I think Harbaugh is always going to prop his guys up. He's always going to talk his guys up and put them out there and be kind of like their agent and do their PR. So I think there's definitely an element to that. In terms of one and done, I mean, yeah, it's always possible. I think what might work against him a little bit is you haven't seen a whole lot of defensive-minded first-time head coaches succeed in the league in the last couple of years. Saleh failed, and he was a hot guy. Staley failed. He was supposed to be a prodigy. The league just they're hyper focused on offensive minded head coaches, and I'm not sure that's necessarily going to change. So that's one thing that could work against him.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think this might also be one of the greatest things Brandon Staley ever did for us is fail, because it just lends to the fact that these first-year defensive head coaches aren't necessarily going to be what you believe and may not work out. But again, it's an offensive league, and if you're going to be a defensive head coach, then you got to have one hell of an offensive coordinator, and those guys just don't grow on trees.
Absolutely. Okay, we got some questions here. So J.Alex Key says, what are we going to try to do and handle the Bengals passing game? I don't think we do well in a shootout. What do you think, Craig?
So as far as the Bengals passing game is concerned, it does worry me just because I think T. Higgins might be back this week also, so they'll have more firepower for Burrow. What I think they have to do, and it's where Burrow shines, he's really good at creating plays outside of the pocket. They're going to have to keep him corralled and make him throw in the pocket. Make him be a pocket passer all game long. I also think I'm pretty sure he's pretty decent against the blitz, so I wouldn't say do it often, but you're going to have to mix that up and get in his face, because I don't know if you're going to get home with 4 as often as you like. So you just have to be creative in your defensive looks. You can get him to put a ball in a bad spot, and he has a tendency to stare receivers down, so there are opportunities there. I just think defensively you're going to have to be a little bit more creative, and the slot blitz isn't going to be it. You're going to have to do a little bit more than that. You're going to have to get creative on the second level and sending guys maybe a safety. Look at those kind of rotations on the back end, sending one safety, make them show blitz and drop into coverage. You're just going to have to mix it up, because you're not going to be able to stay static and play base coverage, whether it's cover 3. You're going to line up in man-to-man and hope to defend. Even with the way Cam Hart and Tarheeb still have been playing, you can't expect them to defend Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, the Yosevich kid. They can all go. So this is going to be one of the bigger tests for Jesse Minter.
So I think it's hard to look at what they did to the Ravens defense and expect them to do that to the Chargers for a couple of reasons. One, the Ravens struggle to get to the quarterback, and 2, the Ravens can't cover anybody. So I do think the Chargers will be better at getting to the quarterback against a pretty suspect Cincinnati offensive line, and a quarterback, by the way, who likes to hold the football. Mm-hmm. So I think they will get to her. I think they will get to Burrow and I think they will be able to affect him and force at least one, possibly two turnovers. I just think they're going to be all over him. The way that pass rush is getting dialed up these last 3 weeks, I think that's going to be a huge factor in the outcome of this game. And the other thing is you got to keep the ball out of Burrow's hands. So you got to limit possessions, and that comes down to the running game. So this may not be a game where we see a whole lot of passes out of Herbert. It might be another one of these like 18 to 25 pass games where they're trying to run the ball, take the air out of the football, bleed clock, possess the ball, and win kind of a lower scoring game. I just don't. They got to keep the ball away from Burrow. They just have to.
Yeah. Don't try to match their game. Play your style. And what you want to do is what your identity has been, what your identity lends to, and what you want to be. You want to be a ball control offense. You want to be able to dominate on the ground, and you can do that against the Bengals. So you're just going to have to be very calculated, not just in the shots you take, because you don't want to not take your shots and go for big plays and maybe get your 2-3 play touchdown drives. Those are great, but you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're keeping your defense on the field a lot and you're asking Herbert to drop back 25 to 30 times a game. That's not the type of game plan you want to implement here. So just like you mentioned, Jamie, I want to see more basically of what we saw this week. Get Gus Edwards mixed in there with J.K. Dobbins and do your thing on the ground. Really slam it in between the tackles, because there's a lot to be had against the Bengals there, and you can wear them down. And definitely Burrow is going to give you opportunities in the passing game, but you have to make those plays. If you get your hands on the ball, you have to do it. Take advantage of it, create those turnovers, get shorter fields, and punch the ball in the red zone. Threes aren't going to win it in this game.
Totally agree. Let's see here. Craig, do you think the offense has found an identity?
I think they always knew what their identity was. It was just a different path to get there, because originally it was like, hey, we have to run the ball on first down, first and second early downs. We have to give the ball to JK and let him figure it out. And then on third down, let Herbert do his thing, make him have to make a play. Now you've seen it the last few games. They started the game off with play action. So they're looking to get the ball in Herbert's hands early and then using the pass to open up the run. So they still are pretty balanced. I mean, they're near like 50-50 pass to run for the year. So they're still doing what they want to do as far as running the ball. They're just getting to it a different way, which is fine. You don't want teams to just walk out there and know that they can just go ahead and put an extra guy in the box and you're going to run the ball regardless on the first two downs. No, now you're going to have to get into too high, which is going to create some additional lanes for the running backs to roll. And now that Herbert can also run, it's more stress on the defense. So I think the identity has always been established. They're just finding a different way to implement what they want to do, and they're finding success.
Yeah, I mean, we know what they want to do. They want to pound on people. They want to lean on them so they can get them into a position where they can impose their will on them in the second half, and particularly in the fourth quarter. And that's how they've won pretty much all of their games, is by following that formula. Now we're just seeing them be, like Craig mentioned, a little bit more open-minded with the pass on first and second down, more play action. They're getting the ball down the field. It seems like they've kind of taken the leash off of Herbert. I think he was in a position in the last couple of years where coaches didn't want him running because they wanted to protect him. And they basically coached all of the gunslinger, all of the playmaker out of him. And they just told him, just check the ball down. If nothing's there right away, just check the ball down. Just be safe. Just protect the ball. And now it's like they've taken the leash off and they said, just go make plays. Just go be yourself. So they're going to pound the ball. They're going to lean on people. And then when the opportunity presents itself, they're going to make plays down the field and they're going to put points on the board and they're going to score when they need to. This is a playoff offense because they can beat you in the air and they can beat you on the ground. And I think it's just going to continue to evolve. So it's going to be a fun second half of the season, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
One more question. How important is it to have Fulton back this week for Chase and Higgins?
Depends on where he is in recovery. Of course, it would be optimal to have him, but if you've got an 80% Christian Fulton out there, does it hurt you? I mean, you're not talking about like a second tier wide receiver out there. You're talking about, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So I don't know if it makes sense to have him out there if he's not fully ready to go when you consider that this is not the end all be all to your season. You want him to be ready to go for the stretch run. I think Cam Hart and Tarheeb still, I mean, can't say anything about Jasir Taylor to this point, but nothing positive after last week. I mean, he wasn't terrible. Let me stop doing that. Jasir Taylor was okay earlier in the season, but no, when we're talking about this level of wide receiving talent that they're going to go up against this week, yeah, I would love to have Christian Fulton. But if he's like I mentioned, 80 to 85%, I don't know if it's worth it if he could hurt himself and be out another few games. So just let Cam and Tarheeb go out there and do their thing the best they can. Let your pass rush go, and hopefully you can contain the passing game. I don't know if you'll stop them even if Christian Fulton was out there.
Yeah, I mean, if he's healthy, it's really important to have him back. I would say an 80% Christian Fulton is better than 100% of Jasir Taylor.
So, I would agree. Yeah, I would definitely say that. You get no argument from me.
Which reminds me, there was a stat a couple weeks ago, which I'm not sure where it came from. I think whoever put it together doesn't know what they're watching, but there was a PFF stat that said that Jasir Taylor, through the Cardinals game, had not allowed a reception in one-on-one coverage. He gave up the touchdown pass in the Cardinals game in one-on-one coverage, and that stat came out after the Cardinals game.
Okay. It's why I don't, shout out to PFF, man. Y'all got all these subscribers. You're doing your thing. You're huge. The NFL uses you. Good on you guys. I personally don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. More often than not, these grades don't make sense. I don't see the game the same way that they do. But, it's great. The NFL seems to value them. So more power to them. Wait. All right. Question. Where's Dean Leonard? Is he on IR still?
I think he's still on IR.
He's like the forgotten man. And it's funny. We didn't mention Eli Apple, did we? And it's also interesting that he gets on the field and you don't even notice that he's there. But he's been playing.
It's funny how that system works. Everybody just blends right in.
And this could be a revenge game for him, by the way.
That would require him being on the field a lot. So hopefully not. All right. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Again, sorry for the delay. I know Craig put out I Got 5 on it this morning. I will be putting out a walkthrough later in the week. And Craig, are you around for mailbag this week?
Yeah, I'll be here.
All right. So we'll get a roundtable out this week too. So back at it this week with the full assortment of shows. And then of course we'll have after hours after the Bengals game. So thanks, everybody. We appreciate you being with us on a Tuesday night. Hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. If you're not already there, join us in the Discord. Lots of good conversation going on. So thank you. Have a great night, and we will see you next time.
Salute.